MTA is a trade association. We represent the locally owned rural broadband providers in Montana. That would be the not the large nationally owned shareholder owned companies, but the little guys who are known for serving the communities that are in their service areas. So it's the good guys. We wear the white hat, and we're in the shining armor. So it's a great group of companies to represent. We have about 11 members. We don't have about. We have 11 members, and they range from companies with fewer than 1,000 customers to companies with close to 20,000 customers, serving about 70% of the land mass of Montana, and employing about 1,000 employees throughout Montana, and investing nearly $100 million in CapEx and OpEx every year. It is a close relationship that we have, and one that's delightful. My member companies happen to be your shareholders, so we have that connection formally, and then the relationship goes further than that, because I like to brag about the advanced communications infrastructure that my member companies have deployed. And just recently, I brought a group of congressional staffers through Vision Net to show off the advanced telecommunications infrastructure that we have deployed, and the state-of-the-art telecommunications broadband access management system that Vision Net has. So it is a close operational as well as political relationship, because it's great to show off. A lot of people who don't realize the state-of-the-art operations that we have in Montana, we like to show off Vision Net and walk them through the knock. It's a good visual display too, and people are always blown away, including the congressional staffers who came through just a week or two ago. They all had great questions, and they all had great responses. It was a highlight of their tour. Opened their eyes to the sophistication of the broadband infrastructure and management systems that we have in place. So Vision Net is my show and tell, a little show off place to go. I always take politicians through there just to demonstrate not only what we've deployed in terms of over 25,000, probably over 30,000 miles of fiber optics throughout the state, but how we have a nationally known management access network through Vision Net. .5G is an interesting animal. I think it's mostly, well, I can't say mostly, but it suffers from a whole lot of hype. There's 3 flavors of 5G, as you may know, and it depends on what spectrum the so-called 5G is using. So in the low frequency spectrum bands, it is the signal can go through a lot of places and a lot of things, so the propagation is really good, but the speeds are really slow. And then there's the mid-band 5G that most of the national providers are bragging about, or actually deploying. They're bragging about a different kind of 5G that they actually don't deploy very much, but they're mostly deploying mid-band spectrum, which perpetrates pretty well, or penetrates, or propagates. There you go. I knew there was one of those P words. Propagates pretty well, and it's pretty fast, but the distance is somewhat limited, and the speeds aren't screaming fast, but they're good. And then there's the ultra high speed millimeter wave spectrum that is very fast, but it doesn't go through anything, and it doesn't go very far, so it requires densification of fiber, and that's where we come in. We connect all those transmitters and those towers with our fiber, and it's a great business. So on the one hand, they're competitors of ours, and on the other hand, they're our great customers. So the millimeter wave 5G, which is ultra fast, is very limited in its application, and it really has almost no application in rural Montana or rural America. Its best setting is like an NFL football stadium, where there's no interference. You can stick a tower, and that's just about the range of a 5G tower too, is about the size of a football stadium. And so it doesn't go very far. And as long as there's nothing to interfere with it, it's great. And you can get streaming service inside the stadium, but you can't get it outside because there's a stadium in the way. And in the mid-range, that's okay, and it's getting deployed in more suburban areas. But once again, the signal isn't conducive for really rural transmission, and so I think there's a whole lot of hype around this 5G stuff. I think the companies brag about how fast it is, except that they're deploying stuff that isn't that fast, and it really doesn't have a great application in rural Montana. It looks a little bit more like LTE, which we're already deploying. So I'm curious to see how that works out, both financially for the providers and commercially for the marketplace, whether people are willing to switch to 5G or if they have a choice in an area where it looks and walks and talks a whole lot like LTE, which we already have. A lot. I think, Vision Net is the internet access provider. They're sort of the back office for what my members do. And so that's an operational partnership. Vision Net provides a whole lot of value added and coordination. So you mentioned having interviewed Inditel, and that's a classic example. So it puts these small rural locally owned companies that MTA represents on the map, on the national map. And so, we collaborate and we aggregate our services, and Vision Net can use that aggregation to expand and to leverage what the small companies do into a much larger national footprint. And so I think that's just a collaboration that works. So there are times when there are public policies that MTA is advocating, and I have called on Vision Net to help out in various ways. So we have helped out in sort of the public policy arena in an informal way. I think an example is 911. Vision Net operates the 911 network for the state. And I'm on the 911 Council, and I have reached out to Vision Net frequently for assistance on technical advice as well as sort of operational advice, and to try to help advocate for public policies. So we do work together on that in that arena, but not in an operational standpoint. It's kind of informal, and we seem to do quite well that way. Well, I think that's a critical goal of MTA. I think the reason we exist really is to help create an environment in which our member companies can grow and excel and continue to deliver broadband services to the communities they serve. So, we sort of pave the way from a economic and political environment. On the negative side, politics and law and regulation can get in the way in the form of fees and various permitting burdens and obstacles to deployment, and so we try to remove those obstacles wherever we can, and then we try to create an environment where our members can exceed their customers' expectations and continue to deploy broadband, which in turn benefits their customers and the state's economy. So a good example is this year we helped pass legislation that allocates $275 million of funding for broadband grants. Montana's 51st in the nation, depending on some measures. How do you get to be 51 when you only have 50 states? You add Washington, D.C., and then so by some standards, we are certainly in the lower grouping of states when it comes to broadband accessibility. It's not generally because of MTA's members. It is because of the large national carriers that have neglected to serve their customers, and so that number of customers adds up pretty fast, and it puts us in the bottom ranking. So the Connect Montana program was enacted earlier this year to provide $275 million from American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, funding, and that's matched by 20%, and then it can be matched further by local governments and schools. So we're talking some serious money that can help improve the broadband deployment and availability environment in Montana. So that's a classic example of what we can do to help our members. The broadband, the Connect Montana program is available to any applicant that has that qualifies as an eligible provider, but it's a long way of answering your question that what we can do to improve the environment, to look forward in the future to where we can lift Montana out of the basement at 51st place and put us in the middle of the pack. And then we have federal legislation that you've probably read about, the infrastructure bill, the small infrastructure bill of only $1.5 trillion, 42.2 billion dollars of which is additional broadband funding. That appears to be moving through. It's passed the Senate. It's going to be voted on this month in the House. All the indications I see is that it will be approved by the House, probably unchanged, because if you change this delicate balance that the bipartisan infrastructure bill had in the Senate, you can mess up the whole thing. So I think the House understands that. They're going to pass it, I think, knock on wood, and that brings at least $100 million more to Montana for broadband. That's a minimum allocation to each state, and then probably another 100 or a couple hundred or a few hundred more to Montana. And then we're talking real money. Then we're talking in the $4 to $7, maybe even $800 million total funding for broadband. That's just the kind of stuff that MTA and Vision Net work together, and my member companies work together on trying to implement. This is like a once in a generation opportunity. We have passed a broadband program that is among the most robust and progressive in the country. So we're ready to roll, and that's just what we do. And so I think looking ahead, again, back to your original question, what does the future look like? I think the future looks like how we can keep this program intact, how we can implement it, how we can maintain and sustain broadband infrastructure and operational activity in the long run. So that's our goal, to create an environment where we can thrive, where we can deliver broadband to our services, where we can expand if possible, and where we have a situation where local community-based broadband providers can win, can deliver those services. And I think there are policymakers at both the state and federal level who recognize the good work that locally owned community-based broadband providers have already done, and they want to help encourage those kinds of companies to continue to provide broadband services throughout their service territories and beyond. And so I think the good work that Vision Net and its shareholders and my member companies have already demonstrated in terms of commitment to their customers has been recognized, and one of my goals is to continue to recognize that and to hopefully provide an environment where they are the preferred provider for future generations. Other than keep it up, keep up the good work. We're in a great spot. We have a wonderful opportunity in front of us to invest further. That's another thing that we sort of do in collaboration with Vision Net. One of my jobs is not only public policy and advocacy and removing barriers, but also identifying market opportunities. And I do that for my member companies and for Vision Net. I just sent something over to Vision Net recently, as a matter of fact, that looked like an opportunity that you might be able to take advantage of. So we're all in a mutual admiration society. We help each other, and it's a very productive relationship, and I look forward to continuing and growing that relationship because we're doing good stuff. I mean, that really is what it comes down to. We're providing the infrastructure upon which economic viability and vitality depend. So it's a great job. It's a great segment of the economy to be in, and we've got a long way to go, and I look forward to working together with you.